So here we are, coming close to the end of fall anime. And there are only a few episodes left for those that are doing half seasons, and well, we'll deal with that when we get there. But for now, we still have a couple of things to cover. Starting, of course, with the show that I always start with, Shangri-La Frontier. And now there were a lot of good things I actually liked in this latest episode. The Beetle helmet is back in play because Sunraku needs it in order to use the new gauntlets he just got. And of course is teaming up with Saiger Zero, and he's also up to his old plotting like he always is, trying to come up with some sort of scheme that he can use to get ahead of everyone. So upon reaching the latest area boss, he immediately sets his sights on speedrunning it to try and set a new record. But this progression march has led us into one of the slower moments in the series, though that is somewhat livened up by his interactions with the world and stuff and his schemes, and the idea of him trying to join up with Saiger Zero in the new future. Dandadan episode 11 was another brilliant entry in the series, and we've been introduced to Gigi now, which means we're just about to start the Haunted House arc. Though I doubt with this episode count, especially with what we have left, we'll see it in this season. But that doesn't particularly matter because the best part of this episode was honestly the chase scene with Taro. The music and the voice acting for that scene was brilliant, and now Okarun has finally realized he actually has feelings for Momo through Taro's antics. It's the same amazing shenanigans that I've loved Dandadan for since the very beginning when I first picked up the manga. And of course, next we have 365 days to the wedding, which ended up forcing our two main characters to live together, which wasn't what I expected out of this episode. I had thought their boss was going to confront them about the fake marriage, but no. And now, because they've skipped around so much in their relationship that they don't even know what step they're on, they're so awkward that they don't really know how to behave. Still, it seems like that barrier is coming down with every interaction, but neither of them is quite comfortable enough yet to go out and make a really bold move. That said, because I like this episode, I'm moving it way up. It now is at number 2 in the very good category. And as long as we're talking about moving, it's time to talk a little bit about Dragon Ball Daima, as this was honestly a pretty disappointing episode. I had hoped that Majin Ku would have a bit more of a fight, that he would be a bit more of a menace or problem for the rest of the crew, but it turns out that he's either spectacularly underpowered or Tamagami number 1 is just way stronger than any of the others. We got some interesting lore dumps about the Kais and the origin of the Glines and all that, and an okay action sequence for Goku saving Pansy, but it wasn't exactly the best display that this series has had yet. On the bright side though, Vegeta is now linked up with the main crew, and we learned that he's a boob guy, so based. I'm also hoping Vegeta gets a chance to fight a Tamagami in the near future because I want him to have a good action sequence all of his own. All things considered, I'm moving it back down to the bottom here. It isn't dropping out of this yet, but I'm not terribly impressed with how things have gone since the first Tamagami fight. Next up on the list is, well, probably one of my least favorite anime of this whole thing, Mecha Ude. It spent a whole episode reviving its main character after he took a fatal wound in the last episode. It's not exactly a bad thing, and I normally wouldn't have an issue with it, but the fact that the main villain was already unsealed and awakened by the time everything even started to get him revived just comes off as poorly planned, and it makes me wonder, what's going on here? Are they even really thinking about the pacing and timing of these events, or are they just stringing them together because they feel like it? We get some contrived speeches to motivate people to revive him, and it spends a lot of time shifting between perspectives to try and pad out the episode. Which is the weirdest part of this because Mecha Ude finally slowed down its insane pacing, only for it to feel entirely boring because the writing is so mundane. Magia Lumiere Co-Limited had a pretty good episode this week, actually. It kind of recovered from the slump that it was in. It focused a lot on how Kana's strengths, her technical knowledge, and understanding of her equipment can be used out in the field very effectively. It also gave us a bit of a glimpse as to how unique that strength is and just how unique she is as a magical girl. So I actually really enjoyed this because it spent a good chunk of time talking about one of my favorite parts of the series, the concept of the brooms, the devices that these girls fly around on. We're also seeing how Magia Lumiere Co-Limited as a company is handling their business by offering their internal processes, development software and such, to the rest of the industry. So it actually feels like they're less of an irrelevant company now and actually making an impact in their industry. All that has moved it up to the very bottom of the interesting category. So next, let's talk about Ranma, because I watched episode 10 and 11 with this. And they were full of the same insane and nonsensical kind of fighting that I've come to like Ranma for, but it's still not my favorite kind of comedy anime. I'm glad the skate thing is over because that was just a little too much for me. It felt a little ridiculous and I didn't really care much for it. But while Sanzani got what he absolutely deserved with that big loss, another problem has now arrived. The transition from episode 10 to 11 brings us another of Ranma's various pursuers. Shampoo, one of the Chinese Amazons. And while that whole interaction is funny with how she wants to kill female Ranma but marry male Ranma and doesn't seem to understand that they're both the same person, I didn't like how it ended with Akane getting hit in the head and losing all of her memories. Some people may enjoy that, but I just don't. It feels contrived and not particularly amazing. Trillion Game episode 9 was actually something I kinda liked more than the rest. I love how much of an evil genius Haru can be at sometimes. The guy has an incredible knack for finding a way to pull off his schemes and has no shame in anything he does. And that's truly his greatest strength. There isn't a thing he won't do in pursuit of his goals, so his work in conjunction with Gaku makes their little scheme they're pulling begin to swing in the direction they want, even in spite of all the roadblocks that they faced up to this point. And for once, I actually like to flash forward. We got a bit of an interesting story out of it because Gaku apparently worked at a host club, and that transitioned well into the episode where it actually covered that part of his story. So well done. Tying the knot with an Amagami sister had probably one of its best episodes yet. We get to see that Asahi is actually developing feelings for Uryu, and not just that, she shows she's jealous of the fact that Uryu might have a thing for Yae. She then starts pestering him with questions to see how he feels. We also get a good interaction where Uryu proves to Yae's friend that he's actually a good guy who isn't just trying to take advantage of the fact that he's living with the girls when he goes out of his way to buy Yuna the snacks she was too considerate to ask for. But the real kicker in all this is the fact that Yae Amagami is actually someone else entirely, as shown by her driver's license that's revealed in this. And this leads me to suspect, based on some other evidence, that the girls might not actually be related at all, while only Yae knows about this. I mean, there's been the question for some time now about what happened to their father, especially since their mother is mentioned multiple times, but nothing of the father's side is ever said. It's opened up a brand new element to this that may complicate the relationship between the sisters in the near future, depending on how it's handled, and it will probably come down to Uryu to try and pull everything back together. I'll be a villainess who goes down in history. Put on a really good episode this week. Probably my favorite episode of this whole season. So Alicia not only goes as far as to put a bully in her place this episode yet again, she then decides to aid and show mercy to said bully later on when she ends up becoming the recipient of all the bullying. I think that kind of displays that her concept of being a villainess is unusual. She still has a heart, and she is still willing to help people. She just does it without the idealism and in a way that she thinks make her seem contemptuous, but most people just see as an odd form of kindness. And to top all that off, we have Duke being jealous of anyone who clings to Alicia. Well, caught in the catch-22 about how he wants to keep her by his side, but he can't because that would ruin what he loves about her. But with all of that, the real kicker for this episode is the fact that the Saint has not only seemed to use her power to manipulate people consciously, but might very well be an agent for another country meant to manipulate the populace. And that all looks like what the upcoming episode is going to delve into. So because of all those things, Villainess moves up to the top of the interesting category. Let this grieving soul retire. I've voiced my complaints in many of these episodes before. I wish Cry wouldn't be utterly incompetent all on his own. At least a little bit of something that he can do would have made him a more endearing character to me, but now I just feel like he's a jackass, like he's never actually going to do anything that matters. It gets even worse now that the Dragon Killer Arnold is trying to take him down because he's pissed, and it just makes the character so much less likable than he already was. In fact, when I think about it, the only character I really consistently like is Tino, because Tino best girl. I wanted to like this one, but it's just not doing it for me because the characters are so unlikable. But if we're talking about likable characters, we gotta talk about Talker. The most notorious Talker runs the world's most powerful clan, had a really good episode in and of itself as it moves into its finale. Though, that cliffhanger makes me suspect that there might be some fuckery at play as the other team might swoop in and steal the kill. Still, Noel's manipulations and his understanding of how people work is what really brings his plans together in this arc in trying to play the group's jealousy and insecurity against them. He is absolutely ruthless and willing to exploit any weakness to reach his goal, even if it may be an unsavory kind of move, and that's what I really find compelling about him as a character. He's driven, he's capable. Even though he might be the weakest class, he is still able to take down threats that most people would think he was incapable of. And, of course, there's the usage of his mental capacity to overload the mind of a monster that can read thoughts. I thought that was a cool writing decision. It wasn't just that Noel was unaffected or had some weird cheat skill to make it all work. It was that he used the creature's ability against it and the tools that he already had at his disposal rather than trying to just power up over it. Bleach finishes off the fight with Lille Boro finally in a spectacular fashion. And I like that these fights have come down so far to the fact that the lieutenants are aiding their captains in the last moment to clinch it. Now, 2 of the 6 of Yhwach's guard are dead, and I'm fairly confident in that assessment of it. And with this episode, we got the background for Nanao and Shunsui, and I thought that was a good touch. But this episode felt like it dragged compared to the others because of that need to explore that backstory so much. Effectively, it added good context to their relationship and to them as characters, but it also felt like the episode suffered for pacing because of it. Orb's latest episode was good, but not move-worthy good. We get that on and off sort of priestly behavior from Badeni, where he acts like he's a man of God at times, and at others he can be absolutely arrogant and very cynical towards people. We also see that contrasted with how Oxy is a very kind person inherently, and with how he pretty much embodies the Christian principles of his time with his charity and his inherent nature. It's an interesting dichotomy that kept this episode, which was otherwise a collection of things unrelated to heliocentrism, interesting still. My biggest gripe, though, is that we don't see much of the scientific exploration of the theory, and that it all just gets put together off screen, and all of a sudden we're told, hey, I'm done with the theory. Loner Life in Another World concludes by explaining how Angelica came back to life. It also actually gave her a voice and revealed to everyone what she looks like, which helps reinforce that she's an actual character, not just some puppet that Haruka has on his team. Of course, Haruka is still committed to his loner thing, and I find that if he's really going to split off from the group here, right at the end of all this, that might just kill whatever the series had going for it up to this point. Regardless, it was an enjoyable series, but I don't think it was the greatest thing out here for this season. It was another junk food isekai, and I think most people who watched it would agree. And finally, this latest episode of You Are Miss Servant feels like a little too much drama. I've liked it best when it was dealing with the healing of the pair's trauma regarding their broken families and loneliness, while also keeping to the more wholesome and positive dynamic they had where they could rely on each other. And while this episode does have a bit of that, which I did like, it sort of overplays the drama angle of it. In driving that wedge between the characters, it feels like it loses the core element of wholesome joy it has between Yuki and Hideyoshi. In a sense, I do like how it's using that issue of companionship with Hideyoshi to make him skeptical of his own feelings, but at the same time it feels like it's not the series' greatest moment because the drama feels so out of place for it. Now, there have been tension and stakes before, but this sort of relationship drama just doesn't feel like it's right. And that's about all of the analysis I have for the week. I haven't caught up on quite everything. But by the end of the season, I'll have a full recap of everything going on, so I hope you'll tune in for that. Otherwise, check out some of my other video essays and anime coverage. I would really appreciate it. They'll be here at the end of the video. Later.